Hello and welcome once again to Money in Motion with Walt West, a financial advisor and the founder of West Advisory Group. I'm your host, Spike Spangle. Every single week we try to help you with retirement planning solutions. We know it's complicated out there, but that's what Walt is here for. Walt, what is on your mind this week, my friend?
Oh, we have tons of retirement planning questions that we're going to get into today, Spike, and just really excited about
Questions, and you've got the answers.
Oh,
right?
I got the answers. There's no doubt about that. So we're going to answer a lot of questions for our viewers today.
You know what? We compiled this as we were doing our pre-show together, and there's so many different questions of when, and we kind of jokingly call this when's in retirement. When do you take Social Security? When do you take from accounts? When do you implement your long-term care? When do you turn on things like income and annuities? And so many different questions, and we just want to help you with some of what the baseline is, even though we know that every single situation is completely different. So sit down with an advisor, find out what's best for you.
Absolutely.
So let's start with this. I've quit the job, or I am so ready to do it. When do we start turning on the income from those retirement accounts? And by the way, which ones do I do first? Do I do the old floating 401ks that are maybe smaller? Do I do the current one from the firm where I just left? Do we turn on the spouses first? There's a lot of different places to look for that income.
Well, of course, you're going to start out with the hard question first, right? So
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Let's just dive right into it, right? You know, in taking money from retirement accounts, I mean, there are so many things that need to be considered when making that decision, right? So, you know, first and foremost is, where is your money, right? So where is it? Is it in taxable buckets? Is it tax-deferred buckets? A tax-free bucket? That's a big piece. And the reason why that's so important is because depending on how you take those distributions, it could be the difference of you having, less money or more money in the future. Because remember, we have a partner, right? Our partner is the IRS. The IRS wants some of that money.
I didn't ask for that partner.
No, I know. You didn't ask for that partner. Nobody does, but they are there and often gets forgotten about. So the frequency and the sequence in which you do that is a big part of it. But really, when you start determining when you should take those distributions, you got to look at all the other income sources. We're all entitled to Social Security. At some level, right? So, when are you going to start Social Security, and how much is that going to equate to what you really need for income? That's an important piece, right? Do you or do you not have a pension plan? That's another piece in it, right? You got to think about.
And we would say we're finding those less and less. I mean, if you're a government employee, police officer, I say protection, everything from fire and police to our educators, teachers, government employees, but less and less and less on the pension plans.
And there's no doubt. So, you won't see much of that around anymore. That transition really took place many years ago, where now you're fending for yourself, right? So it's all about what you've accumulated to that point in time. But you got to think of things like your health, right? How long do you think you're going to live, right? Nobody knows that for sure, but you can kind of look at life expectancies, these types of things. That has an impact on it. What do you want your money to do for you? What is your bucket list, right? How much income do you need? You need to step back, think about what's your budget? What do you need? You need fixed money, you need ancillary money to do all these neat things you want to do in retirement. So that all has an impact on that decision on when you take money. You can't just do that just by entering that quick. You have to take and do a deep analysis into your world before you can make that determination.
Even before we take dollar one, maybe I could go even just a tiny bit further back. When do I transition my money from the former employer to perhaps into my own IRA? We get questions all the time. Say, look, I made a lot of money, I saved a lot of money, my employer helped me, I've been doing it for 10, 15 years, I'm just gonna leave it there because it did pretty good. I don't want to take this money myself.
Yep.
Is there any liability in leaving our money at the employer after we leave?
Well, sure there is. I mean, there's, you don't really have all the options available, investment strategies available for when you're going into the distribution phase. Those employer-sponsored plans were really designed to be accumulation tools. They're not designed to be distribution tools, right? So you kind of outgrow that retirement accounts when you move in the distribution phase of life, right? So it makes it a little bit more complex of getting that money out of there. But I will say one thing that I think a lot of people forget about. We find that there's a lot of people now retiring much earlier than they have in the past, right? And they want to do that. And there's a number of reasons why this happens. But there are benefits of keeping your money in a retirement plan if you're under 59 and a half. That's a magic age, right? 59 and a half is when you can really start to utilize
What
those
is that?
dollars.
What is that with the 59 and a half?
So 59 and a half gives you a couple opportunities. It allows you, from the IRS rules, it allows you to start taking distribution for those types of plans without having that 10% penalty, right?
Oh, okay.
Yep,
All
so
right.
you have to pay taxes, but you eliminate the 10% penalty after 59 and a half. So with those employer plans, of course, you have those things they call in-service distributions, where you can take the money out, roll it into an IRA, and oftentimes that makes a lot of sense, because you talk about, when should I start taking money from my retirement account? Well, if you're then retired, taking the money out of that account, now you can look at other vehicles that are designed to generate income.
We were having a burger, though, last night, and you said, wait a second, there's a couple of things, though, to be aware of, because there's in-service withdrawal, there's the taking it out at 59 and a half, and there's a mistake or two that can be made if you take these funds directly. What is that?
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's what they call direct rollovers and indirect rollovers, right? So the indirect rollover is where they physically send you a check, the custodian, your employer-sponsored plan, but in turn, you don't get all the money because they withhold 20%, that goes to the IRS, and you get 80%. But your intent was to get all the money and put that in a shelter, a retirement account, an IRA, right? Well, indirects don't work that way, right? They automatically withhold that 20%. Now, you'd get it back in a form of a tax refund at the end of the year and into the next year, but you want to do a direct rollover, right? Where you take it from custodian to custodian, right? So you want to make sure you go from one,
kind of keep it out of my hands.
Exactly.
And get it over, so
Directly.
custodian, meaning large firms, custodian, your workplace, over to a custodian, one of those big box firms or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what you do is you're kind of also then the middle person, because you have what's called holding companies as well. Nobody ever writes a check to West Advisory Group,
Exactly.
right? They're a holding company.
That's right. They call them custodians, right? They're houses in which that just holds that money. You've set up an account, an IRA account that is basically a very similar structure than what your 401k or your 403b is, right? So they're very similar in nature from the IRS perspective, right? So the idea is you're kind of transitioning your money to there. But really, what the key is when you transition the money there, the door is open to many other opportunities of where you can invest your money, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on the purpose. It's all about purpose, right? What is the purpose of your dollars at that point in time? You said, when do I start taking that money from my retirement accounts, right? Again, it depends. And how do you take the money out of the retirement account? How much should you take out of the account? All these are questions that you need to have answered, but you really need to go through a thorough analysis to determine what that looks like. You got a spouse, you got, whatever your circumstance might be,
Yeah.
it's going to dictate what that should look like.
So those were the savings in the investment accounts and the 401ks. The next question I want to ask in retirement, when do I start the Social Security? So many people I'm hearing today are wanting to take it early. Before we go out to break, though, the complimentary lab, you will answer some of these questions for individuals who call in personally.
Yes.
In this complimentary 60-minute meeting.
Yeah, you really got to take advantage of the lab session. It really is dedicated to do a diagnostic test on your financial situation. Takes a deep dive in things that are potentially happening to you where money's falling through the cracks, whether you're paying too much in taxes, you're not taking money out of the right bucket when it comes to driving income, or you're simply not asking all the right questions to get the critical facts to make sound decisions. That is really problematic, right? So it really makes sense to take advantage of that lab session. You simply just got to, call the number on your screen, 888-585-8701. It's truly complimentary. It's a time for us to have a discussion. Nothing happens there other than you getting information, becoming more educated about making better decisions as you make that transition from that accumulation phase to that distribution phase.
Walt West, WW, thank you very much. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, when should you start taking Social Security? It might seem simple, but right now we're going to talk about some of the complexities after this break. As Walt said, call the phone number. You can also use that QR code that's down on the bottom of the screen. Open up your phone to the camera function. Point it at that black and white box, and when it activates, click on it. It'll jump you right over to West Advisory Group website, and you can schedule an appointment there if you prefer, or use the phone number. More with WW when we get back right after this.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Ben.
Birthday party for Carol and 5. Happy birthday to you.
Good morning, Ben. Happy Monday.
Daryl's birthday, be there every square. Happy birthday to you. As you can see from our quarterly report on slide number 62, we're trending in the right direction. All signs point to a very positive outlook for the next several years. If you peel back the onion...
Ben, do you have anything to add?
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Money in Motion with Walt West, financial advisor and the founder of West Advisory Group. I'm your host, Mike Spangle, and I like to throw these questions at Walt. Can he help us all with our retirement planning strategies? It's a lot more difficult than it used to be. You were just talking about when do we take from which accounts, and again, it depends. How about the Social Security? A lot of folks right now are talking about taking Social Security early. You're saying some folks want to retire earlier. A lot of worry out there about it running out by 2033, 2034, as some of the projections are, or having to take a reduction. So some folks are going, I want to take this right away because it might not be there down the road. What do you think?
Well, you know, Social Security is definitely one of the things that is challenged today. You hear it talked about quite often, right? About the challenges that they have, right? The underfunding, you know, it's definitely different than what it was intended to do when it first came out in 1935, no doubt about it, right? So, but, you know, there's a big decision that needs to be made when you take Social Security, how you should take Social Security compared to when you take money out of your retirement accounts, or a combination of both, right? So many factors go into that, right? So one thing you should know first is how Social Security works, right? So first off, you're eligible to start taking Social Security at age 62, right? You can delay it all the way to age 70, right? We've talked about this in the past, with the idea is that sweet spot a lot of times is your full retirement age, which is age either 66 or 67, depending on what year in which that you were born, right? So, but what you should know that if you delay it from 62 to your full retirement age, there's a 6% per year increase in that value, right? From 66 or 67 to 70, it's an 8%. So here you know it's very predictable what that is. Now, your retirement account, not so predictable, right? So as you know, if it's money's in the market, you know, what does that look like, right? So you don't know where that's going to be. So
completely unsure.
You're definitely not sure you're going to get 6% or 8%. You have no idea what you're going to get, right? So the idea is you got to kind of really think about and look at your personal situation. You got to do a diagnostic test of your personal situation to determine, you know, what your needs are and, you know, where you really should be taking these distributions. Oftentimes, it's best to delay that. So we look at this, life expectancy is average like mid-80s typically. If you delay it to 66 and a half or 67 there, if you live to 83-ish, for example, if you live beyond that, you probably was a good decision to take Social Security at your full retirement age. But if you don't get it,
how do
who
we
knows?
know
I
that,
understand.
though?
Right?
Although I will say, I've had two grandmothers who lived into their mid-90s. One of my grandfathers was 96 years old. My other grandfather passed away in his 60s. I mean, it's
100% you don't know the future. None of us know the future, but you have to kind of, you know, put some logic into this thing, right? You got to take a look at your situation at the time you're considering Social Security. How's your health? You in pretty good health? Taking care of yourself? Do you have longevity in your family? Right? What about your spouse? Right? So there's some personal decisions that need to be made. And I tell people, don't make your decision on Social Security based on what your brother, your sister, your coworker has done. That's not the way you it's very personal in what that looks like, right?
And no offense as well to the Social Security Administration and the folks out there, but they're legally not allowed to really be giving you financial planning advice. They can talk to you about how you turn it on, or, you know, but if you say, what's best for me? Should I wait until 70? They don't have your entire financial picture.
No, you have to have the entire financial picture to make this decision. They call it Social Security optimization, right? There's a strategy to optimize that Social Security, but what's taken into consideration is all the other income sources that you potentially have to support your lifestyle, right? So you got to take all that into consideration to help you make that decision. I just challenge people. I warn people. The fact is, don't make a Social Security decision just by looking at Social Security alone. It is much bigger, and it's sometimes complicated to really do that. I call it analysis paralysis. You overanalyze the situation, and then you don't make a decision, or you make the wrong decisions because you simply didn't get all the right.
And you can't really undo it. I mean,
No, you
I
can't.
think you can undo it in the first year, but you have to pay everything back.
Everything
so
back,
it's
that's
really
right.
not an undo if you needed that.
And fortunately, we help people walk through that process. So when they make the decision right the first time, because we know that mistakes at this point in your life, when you're thinking about Social Security, of course, you're in the distribution phase now, right? Mistakes become much more costly at this point and very hard to unwind that. So you want to go at it, be fully educated about the decision which you make, so it's the right one.
Okay.
No doubt. It's very important.
And the other just another quick reminder on a lot of folks are saying, I want to take it early, want to take it soon as possible. They could very largely be affecting their spouse.
No doubt, because the idea is, remember, whether it be a working spouse or non-working spouse, let's just take a non-working spouse, for example. Non-working spouse says, well, maybe...
And we're not saying at all that they're not working at home and they're taking care of the house and the kids and everything else. We're just saying non-outside income working spouse.
Yeah, have not put in the 40 quarters to qualify for the Social Security benefit. Well, there's hope there, fortunately, because if it is a non-working spouse, maybe you worked at home but didn't work out in the field, the idea being is that you qualify for 50% of your spouse's benefit, right? So again, but there's a bunch of rules that have changed there, right? As long as your spouse taking their benefit, you could qualify up to 50% of that depending on when they did that. So when you start factoring that into the equation too, that's a way to help actually get more money out of Social Security.
I know you can no longer do the flippy flop, the file and suspend, but so let's say I was the main person working, my spouse doesn't have the 40 quarters. So what is it? It's that I can go, I file for my Social Security, but I suspend it. I say I'm not going to take it. But then my spouse, like if you wanted a little bit of the income, couldn't the spouse turn on there as long as I file for mine, but maybe I don't take it right away?
Well, that used to be the role. That is no longer the role, right? If you have to file and take it, and you have to be taking Social Security for the spouse to qualify to do it.
All those things they've just taken away from us.
And there's all kind of little nuances about Social Security that you must know. And you can go to ssa.gov to get information about your Social Security, of course, but that's just information. That is not planning on how to best structure your Social Security. So
is that part of the lab?
That's part of our lab, taking a deep dive in income planning, right? So when you come to the lab session, we go to a deep diagnostic test, and one of the key elements is your income plan. What is that going to look like? What are the sources? When should you do it? How are you going to be taxed on it? All these things are critical pieces, because I'll tell you, if you don't do that, you will have money falling through the cracks. It really is. And it's again, I often say to people, it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? And if you're not making good decisions because you haven't gone through the proper process to get there, it's likely that you're going to have money fall through the cracks.
Well, we're going to take a very short break. Folks, call right now so you can get your own complimentary lab session. The lab is not a group. It's an individual session with you, your spouse, your family, whoever you want to bring into the session about your income planning for retirement. It is complimentary. It's going to be a 60-minute meeting. We might even have you come back to the office another time and talk about some things or changes that we want to put together. But it's for you, for your family. When do you start that income, Social Security? We're going to help you answer those questions. But you just have to do one tiny thing. Call the phone number you see right here. 888-585-8701. More with Walt West when we get back right after this.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Money in Motion with Walt West, financial advisor and the founder of West Advisory Group. I'm your host, Spike Spangle, and we're talking about the when questions in retirement. When do we turn on our income? When do we take our Social Security? I also then want to ask you, when do we change our investment allocations in retirement? Is this an ongoing part? Do we do this when we're coming? When people come from their work accounts, those 401ks, 457s, are they often surprised when they walk into your office to see how much risk they're taking at that point?
They're always surprised by the level of risk, right? And so when we talk about risk, we really hone right in on the fact that how much loss are you subject to in your investment strategy? Because that's really what matters here, right? Again, not what you make is what you keep. The idea is, and we often find that people are taking on much more risk than they even dreamed they thought they'd be doing, right? So, having the proper allocation based on the purpose of the money is a critical piece, right? So there's low risk, mid risk, high risk, depending where you go. One thing that I challenge people with when they talk about being conservative or being moderate or being aggressive, I always ask, I said, can you please define for me what it means to be a moderate investor? And I just kind of get a blank stare from people because they don't really know how to define it. And they just say, well, it's average risk.
I want some gains, but I don't want losses.
Yeah, right. And it's like, well, I should have diversification, right? Well, I don't care if you're conservative, moderate, aggressive. You're going to have diversification. Diversification is a key element to the success of any investment strategy, right? But we try to define those three pieces, conservative, moderate, and aggressive, to how much loss are you willing to absorb in the event the market went down 30%. If your portfolio went down 20%, how would that make you feel? Well, quite frankly, if you're a moderate investor,
I know that would not be my greatest day, as you like to say.
Right, it would not be a greatest day, right? And people don't realize if you're a moderate investor, that's potentially going to happen to you. When people start to equate the dollars and the losses that they could receive based on that, definition, they start thinking a little differently about risk. And we often find people, when they make that transition, they tend to be a little more aggressive when they're accumulating money, which is fine because you keep putting money in and you benefit from the ups and downs in the market. But when you're no longer putting money in and you're contemplating taking distribution, we call that reverse dollar cost averaging, right? Money acts much differently when you take it out. So you have to think differently about how you allocate money.
There's one tiny thing that I think people also forget about, is that very likely you were getting a match along the way.
Yep.
So it makes it seem like even when the markets are down, you're like, oh, the account isn't so bad, but don't forget about that other $500, $700 that your employer was throwing in there as well. It makes the losses seem not quite so severe during down times.
So I stress to everybody in the audience, one of the things you should do is stress test your investment strategy, that it's appropriate and it's allocated appropriately for your needs as you go through retirement. You first think about, what is the purpose of that money? What is it designed to do? And then how do I protect it? Because you should understand that is now the engine that's replacing you to provide you the potential income you need as you navigate through retirement. And the longer you live, the more important that becomes.
Right. Walt, I've got to ask you one more when here in retirement. When do we start talking, thinking about, and acting on long-term care? We are living longer than we ever have. The investments are incredibly important. The income is incredibly important. What about risk managing our own life and our own savings with the long-term care?
So that is a great question, and that's something that gets, unfortunately, swept under the rug and avoided because people don't want to talk about ever becoming sick. Unfortunately, there's a 70% chance of a married couple over 65 needing long-term care at some time before they pass on, right? It's a real thing. Quite frankly,
you're just saying that 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4 are going to need.
You
some married
sort
couple,
of long-term
you hit
care.
The 65. One of you is going in, and quite frankly, my family was 100%. Both of my grandmothers eventually needed it. Nothing was so terrible along the way, but eventually the dementia set in, and we just can't cook and take care of ourselves.
Exactly.
What are the average costs around here?
Well, around here, if you get, there's different levels of care, right?
Yeah.
You got home care, you got, adult daycare, you got, skilled nursing care. Skilled nursing care, that's 24/7 care, right?
Yeah, skilled and cognitive care.
$10,000, $12,000 per month,
Wow.
right? That's a big number. That's a big number. The question is, how do you pay for it? right? How do you pay for it? So the first thought is, how much risk are you willing to assume when it comes to long-term care? How much do you want to transfer? When you talk about transferring risk, you're basically looking outside, whether you're going to, buy a long-term care policy or buy some form of a insurance product that helps to protect you against that type of risk. So you want to have peace of mind, knowing, especially those people that say, hey, I know this has potentially happened. I want to make sure I maintain my independence and my integrity. I don't have to worry about my family, taking on that burden and helping, right?
Walt, can I tell you, so I've been looking into those myself. When I started in the industry, me as an educator, I have found that the long-term care policies of 10, 20 years ago, those hadn't been as effective. And people would come to an educational event and go, they just doubled my premium. They just tripled my, can they do that? And they're like, yeah. It's because the insurance companies realize we're living longer. But now there are other ones, and I will say that they are usually attached to annuities, right?
Yep.
You get a certain kind of annuity, you can have a long-term care rider. Fan or foe of some of these kinds of products?
Well, if it fits into what you're trying to accomplish, it's a tool, right? You just think of it as a tool, and it's there to do a job, right? If that job...
You don't have an emotional feel. I'm saying fan or foe, you're like, no, it's a tool. I don't care about a hammer, but when I need a hammer, I'm glad I've got it.
Yeah, don't worry about what the thing is called. It doesn't really matter. What job is it intended to do that fits into your particular situation? Or, we always look at that as saying, okay, you're worried about long-term care. You're concerned that you might have this. You had a family member go through it. You know what that risk is all about, and you're looking to transfer the risk. Let's look at your financial picture and let's see what tools are appropriate. Annuities give you, there's benefits on there that provide distributions or double income of the benefits, so you can help to offset long-term care costs. Life insurance is a big one today. There's new products that have been developed over the last group of years. So it's more than just a death benefit. People think of life insurance, I have to die to get a benefit. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Even if you say, I have to die to get a benefit, I have to die for them to get a benefit.
Exactly. Well, you don't really get the benefit. Your family does. Yeah. Absolutely. But with life insurance today, they have living benefits. So now, as an owner and an insured of a life insurance policy, it could pay out some of the death benefit while you're living to offset your long-term care costs. They tend to be more attractive than the traditional type, because you said it. It's kind of a use it, lose it proposition. If you don't use it, you don't get any future benefit. Where life insurance, you get a living benefit, but if you don't use it, of course, there's a death benefit.
Walt, thank you so much for answering these questions on retirement, as you do every single week, but not just here on the television show. They do it every single day in the offices at West Advisory Group. If you'd like to figure out when do I turn on my income, when do I take Social Security, when do I consider long-term care, estate planning, Social Security, all of that together, all you got to do is call the phone number you see right here so you can get your own complimentary lab session. 888-585-8701 for Walt West. We'll be back again next week.